Hello, my name is Rebecca Ibel. I'm here at Contemporary Art Matters in Columbus, Ohio, and I am on a Zoom call with the one and only Linda Gall, an artist that I've worked with for many, many, many years. Friend, family member, feels like an incredible painter, drawer, draftsman, storyteller, collector of all kinds of ideas. And a treasure in Ohio. Our exhibition portraiture will feature works by Linda Gall of her granddaughter, Hazel. I have drawings behind me here of my daughter, Sarah, who Linda has captured many times over the years. And the exhibition will be up in the late summer, August 15th through September 15th, 2021. So with that introduction, I'm delighted to welcome here today Linda Gall.
Hi, Rebecca. Happy to be here. Thank you for doing this.
I'm delighted. So I feel like these journeys often start with aging ourselves, because we have been friends for many years and our connections go back to our days at the Ohio Art League, where you were the director and I was on the board, and we worked together many years. There, I showed your work in the gallery in the Short North in our first location, 95 maybe?
Probably, it was in the 90s for sure.
Yes, and we've worked together in the gallery, behind the scenes, at the Pizzuti collection.
I've worked in your gallery. I've worked for Pizzuti. Yeah.
So I feel like I know your work very well, and I'm thrilled to sit with you. I love the way you consider and capture family, the importance of family members, but more so the larger community, and you seem drawn to the beauty in its uncurated form. It's many of the works are around disasters or buildings being torn down, or what is about change in histories that are failed histories, and our families, which aren't failed families, but maybe not always perfect.
Almost no, I don't know any perfect ones. There is no such thing, I think, and if there were, it would be so boring. It's much more interesting to paint and think about families that are just families, and maybe even disastrous families. Disaster being a prime word in my vocabulary.
It is, and I think back to some of the earliest paintings that I remember of yours, and they were a dive into old family photographs.
Yes, and even then, it wasn't. It wasn't so much just the paintings of the families, but where I put them. And I would put them in places where they shouldn't be, maybe in positions they shouldn't be. Maybe they'd be hanging from the ceiling upside down, or in a mosque way back in the 90s where no one in my family had ever gone. You know, I like that. I also used old pictures that I would find, because I, would find old photographs in antique stores and people would give me things. I loved using those people. I loved looking at the person and thinking about who they were and what their expression meant and what their clothes meant and what were they doing when they posed for these pictures, these photographs. But I'm not interested in just reproducing a photograph. I use it as my source, but I am trying to get to something deeper than what I consider these photographs to do. And I am not that good at doing a photographic reproduction of a person's face. I like to distort them a little bit, but not in a surrealistic or Picasso-esque kind of way. Um, they still look pretty normal in a certain way, although the face might get lost, especially in watercolors, in a puddle of paint and water. And then somehow or other, what I love about it is the magic of where the face comes out of that puddle as it dries.
So in a sense, how do you think about this? Your work has focused on the figure, both people you know and people you don't know. How do you think about portraiture versus figurative painting for you?
Well, it's always been, I think it's always been a real dilemma for me to think about the difference between portraiture and painting the figure, because I kind of thought for most of my life that portraiture was something that was something I didn't really want to do. I didn't feel like you had freedom when you were doing a portrait. This was my thought. I'm not saying this is true. I don't really think the same way about it anymore. But I used to feel like if I was doing someone's portrait, that it was constrained and it had to be a certain way because people want to see themselves. But I didn't want to do that. And so I would generally make them, without even thinking about it, make them distorted or have funny teeth, as you would say, and emphasize things that I didn't think were at all off base. It's what I saw, because when I do a portrait, I'm delving in to what I'm looking at. I spend long times looking at the details of the person's face or hands or body, the stance and all that, trying to capture that more than the likeness. And then when I say, oh, but this is supposed to be a portrait of a particular person that I'm making for them, then I start to feel constrained. So I always had this kind of war going on when I was doing portraits for people. And now I feel very differently about it, because I think a portrait should be a painting. And I've always tried to make it into a painting, something a little more than just a likeness of a person.
There is, for me, a portrait is about a person, a time, a place, a history of sorts. And the likeness or the flattering idea of what we think we're supposed to look like or feel like is not always the central focus of your work.
Sure.
But you do capture the energy and the personality of the people, and maybe challenge the viewer in a little bit, but I find them incredibly joyful.
They are to me as well. They make me feel very joyful. And my two comments to people who are disappointed in something that I've done of them or their child or a relative of theirs or a friend is that, number one, you will look like this someday. I can't exactly explain it, but somehow, we all change all day long. We look different during the whole day, and certainly over a lifetime, and certainly over a couple of months or a couple of years. And when we look back at the portraits, then we recognize them much more than when we first see them. My second thing that I tell people is, you should see what I do to myself in my self-portraits, of which there are many. And
actually, let's talk about that. You did on social media a portrait. Was it watercolors? Was it every day, or?
It could be anything. I set it was after my husband died, and I was having trouble, I felt, getting back into working. So I set the problem up that I had set up when I first got out of school and was kind of stymied, that every day I had to do something. I had to do some kind of artwork every day. It could be a sketch, it could be anything, it could be, you know, but what I did at that time was I said, every day for the next year, I'm going to do a self-portrait. It can't take, it can only take 30 minutes at the most. It can be in any media and any size, although they tended to be kind of small. So there are pencils, there are ink pictures, there are watercolors, and they're all on paper. There's magic marker ones, and then I take a picture of it and I would post it as my profile picture on Facebook. And I made no announcement about it. And it took about a month before people started saying, hey, what are you doing? Your profile is changing every day. And, you know, and so it got some attention that way. I didn't make 365 of them, but I got into the 200s, very close.
Well, I do think there's something important happening in portraiture as a genre, not only to capture histories or families, but families come in different shapes and sizes today. My family is not a traditional family.
No.
And it brings joy to me as a parent, but I think it also brings value to the sitter. They feel valued and loved. There's something about an embrace of a portrait that, regardless of how cheesy or flattering it is, when it's a real work of art, there's a value that cannot be matched in other art forms.
Exactly. That's exactly the point that I think about. But you've articulated it so much better than I can. It is. You have to, when you think about doing portraits, you have to wonder why you're doing them, and especially in the age of photography, when anybody can make numerous photographs of another person all day long, and some of them are going to be really good. And some people are very good with their phones and taking really great pictures. I tend to take lousy pictures, and I often take pictures of the person that I'm going to paint. And I prefer working from my bad photos than from, say, a studio photo or a photo taken by a professional photographer, because in my opinion, that photograph is usually already its own work of art. And so all I can do really is replicate it or try to replicate it. But if I use my poorer photos, or if I use your snapshots, then I can make it a work of art, because I can then make it my own.
Well, I know you say they're bad photos, but I think what you're doing is capturing activity and spontaneity and things that happen that reveal yourself in between the forced smiles and the bent knee and the
Right.
shoulder forward and those kinds of poses.
Yes.
So the more naturally captured times are when people let their guard down and reveal themselves to you.
Yes, and with my phone now, instead of my cheap cameras from before, I can snap 100 photos while somebody's just walking across the room. And you know, and so that way, you're right, I can catch something that is not opposed, like the watercolors I did of people looking at artwork. You know, I caught people from behind that with attitudes that they weren't aware of. You know, they did not know that anybody was recording them or was going to use it. And so I thought if you knew the person that I painted, you probably would recognize them, even though it's from the back. But you know,
I have seen your portraits of people where you don't even see their face.
Not their face isn't even there, but you know who it is.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I have another question for you. You choose to work on a fairly small scale for most of the portraits. The largest drawings are 16 by 20.
Yeah.
Your early paintings of family members, even though they may not have been a portrait, were much larger.
And well, and also they had all these other stories going on with them. You know, they had backgrounds, and a lot of my portraits don't have anything in the background. I'm just not. I wasn't concerned with that for a long time. I was more concerned with the person themselves and their facial expression and the way they use their hands, or something about them. The early ones weren't meant as portraits ever, and I never even tried to necessarily make them look like the person in my family, although they generally did. It was more about where they were, and you know, how can I disorient them, and how does it become part of a larger painting? I
Sort of
actually,
an accidental portrait.
yeah, yes, exactly. That
And you seem to have eliminated the noise around people,
yes, I'm
not
looking at a
using other
painting.
things as crutches or distractions in capturing what you're doing.
Right, exactly. I'm looking at a painting here in my daughter-in-law's office of my son when he was probably about 3, and he's lounging on one of those webbed lounge chairs outside with his flippers on and his bathing suit, and he's upside down in this painting. And there's a dome of a mosque above him, and around him he's floating in it upside down, and it looks a little bit like he did it in those days. We know who it is, you know, those of us who knew him at that time. But the important thing for me in that photo was that I found this snapshot of him in the chair, and I used it upside down and put it in a different place. And so it started a whole other narrative, you know, that maybe came true in a way.
Okay. So you have moved a little bit. You started out in Zanesville. You came to Columbus to go to art school, Columbus College of Art and Design. You
I
moved
grew
to
up
New
in
York.
Columbus. Yeah.
Pardon?
I grew up in Columbus.
Oh, you grew up in Columbus.
Yes. I went to CCAD for 1 year after high school, dropped out to become a hippie, and ended up in New York, where I lived for probably 5 to 7 years, somewhere around that time. Got married and moved to New Jersey, lived in New Jersey for a few years, and then we moved to Puerto Rico for almost 3 years. And from there, we moved back to Ohio. And we settled in Zanesville because my mother lived there, and she was alone and she was going blind. And so we lived in Zanesville since like 1983 or 4. And then after my husband died, I went to New Mexico for about 5 years. I lived there. And then back to Ohio, to Zanesville again.
It's interesting. Your mother appears in our current portraiture exhibition. She may still be going blind, but you've been caring for her very well over the years because she's alive and well. And she has been the source of your
I posted one day when she turned 90, I think, on Facebook, I posted a series of paintings that I had done of her over the years, and said, my mother and I have had a very rocky relationship for the 70 years of my life, and ups and downs, you know, very, very difficult relationship. And yet she appears over and over and over again in my paintings. I can't stop painting this woman.
Apparently not. And now you have a new, wonderful, joyful sitter for your attention.
Oh, Hazel. Yes, absolutely. She is just amazing, and she looks so amazing, and she's active, and we have lots of photographs of her doing things. My favorite that's in the show is the one where she is doing a yoga pose out in the yard, and I can't think of what she calls it. Is it down doggy with the left leg up or something like that? And I have to get it right when I talk about it. But I love that kind of a pose where um, the body language is so wonderful. The way the body is arranged is so wonderful, and the face is in a puddle of watercolor, and yet I can see her in that puddle. It looks like her, and but I think that the pose, the yoga pose, is just really exciting and exciting to paint. It makes an exciting composition, and it says a lot about her. She's 3 years old in 2 weeks.
How wonderful. And you have painted and drawn my daughter since she was an
Oh,
infant,
yes.
up to more recent tween years,
Oh,
capturing the different ages, and they're incredibly special to me. And my daughter rolls her eyes about them.
of
Oh my
course she does. Of course she does. But
God.
she
There,
is.
I have one where she's making a crazy face with her tongue sticking out and her eyes rolling, and things she would do. She was very full of expression, and capturing these moments are maybe not traditional to think of that, but
But they're wonderful.
realizes a
Um,
real person at a real time in a way, even though you say their faces in a puddle. That's, I think, just more of the technique of watercolor. You allow it
it's
to be
that it is. It's
looser.
all that's the technique, but the result is art. I think that the things that you're talking about with the paintings of Sarah, and especially the one where she made the face for me, um, you at the time you might say you probably wouldn't because you know much more about it, but you might say, what am I supposed to do with this? This is horrible. My child is sticking her tongue out and her eyes are crossed, and she's pulling her face apart and everything. And but years later, does it not feel precious somehow?
It's very precious, and I think there's also a false idea that a portrait must capture the entire essence of a being over the course of a lifetime. And that's obviously not true and not possible. So,
Awesome.
especially in childhood, to capture those fun moments, the crazy, zany moments, uh,
Yes.
I, and it's also part of a series. I mean, in the drawings behind me, you see it's not one drawing, it's a group of her
Yes.
moving around and playing.
Yeah. It's not even one day, but they all. It's probably in a month or so. I probably took those pictures. I can't really remember, but I probably took those while I was babysitting her.
I know you did. You did. You've been part of my life in every way for a
Yeah.
long time. But I think it's interesting. The portrait commissions that we have done have often been, you would commission a group of drawings. So you wouldn't just buy one painting. There
No.
would be a series of 5 or 6 drawings.
Right.
So that
And
that funny face isn't the sole embodiment of the person. It was just another element of the
it
series.
could be similar to what you have behind you. A group of 4 or 5 pictures, um, and then you can. Sometimes we let people choose a few of them, but most of the time they take them all
Yeah,
because they're just. I mean, we've offered that in the past. Here's 5. Take you want 3 of them or what, and they take all 5 because they're all really good. I'm not tooting my own horn. I am a little bit, but they're wonderful. You can't choose and leave a couple of things of your child or your parent or whatever out when you see those. That yes, I don't know what else to say about that.
no, it's true. And I think, I'm very excited to be working with you again. I know you're in an exhibition right now at the Hammond Harkins Gallery
Yes.
of some of my favorite drawings. I just love children and guns and
Boys playing with guns.
boys playing with guns. They're haunting images, really fantastic. And I appreciate how you have embraced social media. You live in the boondocks in the middle of nowhere, but you are able to reach a wider audience with that. And I think you're able to connect people to their own families and our own roots in a way that helps us identify with things, as well as I know you've tackled other subjects and, focus on different ideas. But I'm very thrilled to include your work in this exhibition, and
I'm so thrilled to be part of it. Thank you so much.
we'll see a selection of works, portraits by Linda Gall of Hazel coming
Great.
up.
Thank you very much. And, I would love to paint your portraits.
I have already signed you. You've gotten most of my family members.
Well, I'm not just talking to you.
I know. No, it's doing a portrait commission requires sort of a leap of faith
Yes.
and trust, and you do have to believe in an artist in a way to expose yourself and your loved ones.
That's true.
But the care that you pay and the attention and the joy that you find, especially in the younger sitters, but also in adults, is incredibly rewarding. And it must come from living with artists and musicians and having a creative household yourself.
It may. I didn't grow up in a creative household, but yes.
You created one.
But I created one. But I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
Well, I remember visiting your studio in Zanesville, and you had a sort of a great room, if you will. And in there was your painting studio, was Ron's music studio. The boys had their musical instruments set up.
Yes.
It was
they had their playroom. He had his office. We were all in an enormous room, 40
but
by
it's
50
full of
people.
music and painting and
Yes. Yeah. There were always activities going on there. It was our gathering place.
well, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you for having me.
And come and see the exhibition. And we'll post some images so you'll get a preview of it here.
We'll see you in August.
All right. Cheers.
Love you.